Good morning, everybody. Before we start, could I ask you to stand with me this morning for a minute's silence in memory of Pat Ryan, who very sadly passed away on Friday, the 11th of November. Thank you. Thank you. Could I just ask you to sit for a moment? Because I understand there is somebody going to speak from the Labour side and somebody from the Conservative side. Thank you. Councillor John Merry.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Chair. When the Mayor asked me to say a few words about Pat, I was thinking back over a service on this council. And for those of us who knew her, right, she wasn't someone who made fiery speeches in the chamber. She wasn't someone who thumped the table at Labour Group and demanded that things be changed. She was a different sort of councillor, actually, and one that was nonetheless effective for the way in which she operated on behalf of her ward and on behalf of the people of this city. She lived and worked in Little Halton before being elected to represent the people of the ward, and I think she was well respected in the area as somebody who wanted to make a difference for the residents. She spent her career in education, teaching local children, and she wanted to use her knowledge following her retirement to be elected to the council in 2006. And she was, of course, on many panels. Councillor Warmishan was saying to me that she was on licensing with him and other panels, including corporate parenting, adoptions and school governing bodies. And the one thing I remember about Pat, above all else, is her sheer determination to campaign for the people of Little Halton and to ensure that they got a good deal within the council. And she played a major role in engaging with the community on the big lottery fund. When I was leader, I appointed her as an executive support member for housing in 2008. And it was really interesting to see the way in which she operated in that particular role. She, as far as she was concerned, her job was to support the lead member, but above all else to pay attention to the detail, the myriads of details that are required in that job to make it effective. So I think as a councillor, I want to remember her as being, first and foremost, a huge advocate for her community, someone who was deeply compassionate and cared about everybody who came across her sort of bailiwick, as it were. And as a councillor, I think it's difficult sometimes. There is always a danger, I think, that you suffer from compassion fatigue, when yet more people turn up with problems. That was never the case with Pat. She was actually always there for people, always willing to actually go the extra mile for people. And where she thought injustice was being done, she'd go to really important people within the council and make sure that their position was respected. Yes, she disagreed with me from time to time. I actually think it's quite important to have people around you who disagree with you from time to time. And I have to say, looking at some of you, I think you take that a bit too far sometimes. But no, I think it's incredibly important. She fought for her community. I think as councillors, that's all we can ask for, is people who are effective advocates for their community, look after them, and are prepared to do their best for the people of Salford. And I think Pat is an outstanding example to all of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say just a few words, and I am going to say just a few words. The first few will be that I endorse entirely what Councillor Merry has said regarding Pat. I have sent a letter of condolences on behalf of our group and had a reply, a nice reply. I've sat on several committees with Pat. I remember her being elected. It wasn't such a surprise that she won, because we didn't really have any great ambitions of taking that seat. But I remember mainly, as Councillor Merry said, she didn't shout from the rooftop, she didn't say much, but she took it all in. And the thing that I do remember sitting next to her, and I always tried to sit next to her, because she had a passion for Fox's Glacium fruits, not the mints. I'm not so fond of the mints, and I don't think she was. So she used to share those quite liberally with me, and of course my wife, who was on the council. So it's with Pat. I have really great thoughts of Pat. She was a lovely lady.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Could I just ask you now to stand while Rabbi Saunders says prayers this morning?
City Mayor, councillors, City Director, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me this great honour of extending a blessing prior to your council meeting. I don't want to sound like one of those Oscar winners, but I regard it as a great honour, not just for myself, but also for the entire Jewish community of Salford, which, according to official statistics, make up 3.3% of the population of Salford. We've just had a minute's silence. Can I, in that particular vein, firstly mention, as I did the other day at the Remembrance service just down the road, that tomorrow is actually the centenary of the end of the Battle of the Somme. There seem to be lots of commemorations of the beginning of the Battle of the Somme in July. For whatever reason, we don't seem to be commemorating the end of the Somme battle, but that occurred on the 18th of November. I think some versions say the morning of the 19th, but either way, it's this week, and I think it's very appropriate for us to reflect today on the Battle of the Somme, which needs, I believe, no elaboration from me in this chamber. Also, I understand that there's one or two members, esteemed members of this chamber, who are not in the best of health, and I'm sure that you would all join me in extending sincerest wishes for a speedy recovery to them, and our thoughts are with them and their families. Interestingly, the very name Salford actually means, I think it was in Latin, a brook of willows. Now, willows are actually a holy item in the Jewish religion. We've just celebrated the Festival of Tabernacles, and a willow is one of the 4 species that we use in the service, taken from the verse in Leviticus 23. We have to take date palms, a citron, and fruit of a twigs of a plated tree, and brook willows. And the name Salford actually means a brook of willows. So I think, for me, it's very appropriate, living in the city of Salford. We could almost say that as far as the Jewish population is concerned, Salford is a holy city. Even the sports stadium was for many years named the Willows, until they went and changed the name to the name of a Babylonian idol Bell. But I must say, before AJ Bell or my good friend Marion Kukash starts consulting their lawyers, let me just say that that was a joke. Let me also assure you, I know many of you will know me from other capacities, but as I was the other day, of course I'm here purely in a non-political religious capacity representing the Jewish community. You might be interested to know, just before I finally give the actual blessing, the last time I did a blessing before a council meeting, I won't tell you which the council was, but I was told that the person before me was, believe it or not, a Maori priest. And apparently he was actually ejected from the chamber by a very officious city director because he insisted on taking in his Maori sword. And apparently it was against the regulations to bring a sword into the council chamber. I presume you've not had any similar problems. But I must tell you, unfortunately, I cannot stay. I've got a medical appointment as well as a funeral later. But on this occasion, I did stay for about an hour. And I have no idea what your deliberations are like, but let me tell you, this particular council meeting made Prime Minister's question time seem like a vicar's tea party. And they were only discussing bin collections. Anyway, if I can finally end with a formal blessing, I'm going to say two brief blessings. This is a blessing we say in our synagogues on a Saturday morning, and I think it's very appropriate. You know, we live in an age where perhaps politicians don't get the respect they deserve, but I have to say that I think politicians, whether they're national or local, do a very important job. Sometimes we can literally make a difference to people's very lives. We can be discussing in a council chamber or parliament literally matters of life and death, and I know that people take that responsibility very seriously. So let me end with, firstly, this blessing. All who occupy themselves faithfully with the needs of a community, may the Almighty, blessed be He, give them their recompense. May He send blessing and success to all the works of their hands. And if I can end with the blessing that Her Majesty the Queen gives, not that I have any ambitions in that direction, if I can end with the blessing she gives at the state opening of Parliament, I pray that the blessings of Almighty God rest upon your councils. Amen.
Please be seated. Thank you, Rabbi Saunders. Moving on to business today. I've had no notification of any special business today. Apologies. Have we got any apologies? No apologies. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Have we got all those? Sorry, yes. And there was somebody else. Councillor Peter Wheeler. Is that it? Okay, thank you very much. Has anybody got any declaration of interest today? No? Thank you. Do we have any petitions to be presented to Council today? Yes, Councillor Critchley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to submit a petition signed by 160 residents who live on and around Hilton Lane in Walkden. For over 18 months, they've had to put up with constant dirt and filth coming from the hundreds of lorries entering and leaving the development at Burgess Farm. I'd just like to read the petition. It says, "We, the residents and neighbours of Hilton Lane, demand that the Council take action against contractors, Redrow and Bloor Homes, for the intolerable conditions in which they now have to live in, and the continued breaches of planning conditions and good practice. The residents are calling for simple actions, including lorries to be covered, as and when they arrive and leave the site, for wheels to be washed, vehicles to be checked for loose material, and for the pavements and areas to be cleaned properly." And I just want to give an example to members who can see the problems residents having to live in. This lump of concrete is the type of thing which is falling off lorries as they pass people's houses. If that had gone through a car window, it would have hurt someone, and if it's a pedestrian, it would have killed someone. But residents having to put up with this for 18 months, this development's going to go on for several more years. So I'm hoping by handing over this petition that officers will finally take action to deal with this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Critchley. Thank you. And I have made the first deliberate mistake today. The minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 21st of September, are they approved as a correct record? Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 6, which is a review of the parliamentary constituency. The monitoring officer will present this.
Yes, Chair. This is a review of the Parliament.
Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. This is a report in respect of the response to the Boundary Commission review of parliamentary constituencies in 2018. The Council is asked to approve the attached draft Council response to the Boundary Commission's initial proposals for their 2018 review of parliamentary constituencies. The response is attached. I don't propose to go through it, but if anybody has any questions, I'll take those.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? No? Any comments? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, City Mayor.
Just by way of a comment, I'd just like to thank the opposition for supporting this submission. I think it's fantastic that we've got cross-party support in terms of our submission into the formal consultation around the boundary review on behalf of this City Council, so thank you.
Thank you, City Mayor. Moving on, Treasury Management Mid-Year Report. Can I ask the lead member for Finance, Councillor Hines, to present this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is one of the periodical reports from the on Treasury Management. The background, of course, is under the Local Government Act 2003. One of the three Treasury Management reports taken to the Council or scrutiny. Just some of the interesting issues that we're looking at. The economic update and interest rates, where we've seen that GDP rose by 2.1% during the first half of 15-16. Obviously, with the referendum, we're keeping a close eye on what happens there. We know that the bank rate was reduced to 2.25%. That could reduce further. But of course, again, we're looking at whether interest rates rise over the next time, where it may reduce a little bit, but we don't know yet. We've seen the fall of sterling over that period of time, so we do live in uncertain times. The investment strategy, you can see that in the report. Borrowing rates remain at a historical low, which we're taking advantage of. The investment portfolio, we're still keen to invest into the city and bring further investment in. External borrowing, you can see that the figure there over our present time now is £636 million up to date. Debt rescheduling, we continue to listen to our advisors on whether we need to look carefully at whether we do reschedule debt. Difficult at the minute. We've had reports before of Lobos, which have been with us for a number of time. Majority of our debt is in Lobos, but at the moment it isn't in our interest to do anything about that. So unless there's any questions, there's the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thank you, Councillor Hines. Are there any questions? Any comments? I think it's another year of not asking any questions. Everybody's kept their heads down because perhaps we need a briefing on that. Thank you very much. Right, item 8 is the Salford Council Constitution. I think, is this you? Yes.
Yes, Chair. Sorry. Apologies again. This is a proposed change to the Council's constitution to provide for arrangements for pension admissions. Within the constitution, the schemes of delegation contains details of the delegation to individual chief officers. The current delegation includes the ability to determine requests for guarantees to the Greater Manchester Pension Fund, but it doesn't provide for arrangements for the approval of applications for admitted body status. This report's asking for an update to the wording to include the approval of applications and the basis of admission, and we've set out the amendments below. The amendments do provide for consultation with the relevant executive lead member and the monitoring officer, and in consultation with the strategic assistant mayor for workforce when that is the relevant member consultation. So I'm asking that the council approve and adopt the revised constitution.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions on this? No? Any comments? No. Well, it's up for approval. Everybody who's in favour, please show. Anybody against? Anybody? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9. Item 9 is going to be presented again by Miranda Crothers-Watt as Assistant Director, and the report is from the Independent Remuneration Panel, after which I will permit members to ask questions.
Yes, Chair. The Constitution provides that following the election of a city mayor and restructuring of senior positions within the cabinet, then the panel was established in accordance with the local authorities' members' allowances regulations to review the members' allowances scheme. The panel was an independent panel chaired by Alison Page, Chief Exec of Salford CVS, and it had on it Julie Charge, who's Director of Finance at Salford University, Phil Cusack, the Chair of Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce, Neil McEnroy, the Chief Executive of, I can't remember the initials for CLES, to my shame. Splendid, thank you, City Mayor. And Liz McHugh, who's the Chief Executive for North West Employers. Nobody was paid a fee for the work that they did, and they looked at a number of issues with regard to the way in which mayoral allowances were established, and they set out some thinking with regard to that. The panel were clear that as an independent panel they made objective recommendations and based them on the evidence that they saw. They looked at a number of formula that would allow them to take an initial, the members' main allowance, the basic allowance, as a building block to look at how allowances should be identified. The report was considered by the City Mayor, and he looked at the panel's concerns but proposed an alternative recommendation placed in the context of the costs and the position with regard to the allowances. The independent panel's recommendation would have seen the table on page 3 at the top. The costs would have been $415,000 for the whole year. The City Mayor's proposed alternative arrangements at £375,742, which is less than the recommendations from the panel in 2012. Council are asked to consider, firstly, the recommendations of the Independent Remuneration Panel and determine whether you wish to agree, amend, dismiss or adjourn a decision, and secondly, the alternative recommendation proposed by the City Mayor. Once the report has come to yourselves, then we will make copies of the report available for inspection and a notice to be published in respect of the scheme. I think probably the best action is for me to take any questions, Madam Chair, in respect of that, rather than to look to identify any further information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any questions to ask on this matter? Sorry, Councillor Turner.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm a bit confused here. Are we on item 8 or 9?
We're on 9, which is the independent remuneration.
So where would we make comments? On item 9? I mean, we've heard a long screed, with due respect. I haven't got any questions, no.
Sorry, we're doing questions first. If there's any questions, no questions, right, can I have comments, please? Councillor Turner.
Well, I'm actually commenting on 9, but are we going to 9?
We're on 9. We're on 9.
We're doing 9?
We are.
I thought we were doing 8. Never mind. You might be surprised to know that we agree with the Mayor's actions in this respect. It's good Conservative policy to reduce spending at all times possible, and of course it was on our budget, our alternative budget. We hope this is a start of better things to come. Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson. No. Oh, sorry. Right.
City Mayor.
Sorry. City Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the Independent Remuneration Panel. Obviously, we accept their report, and I thank the hard work that each member of that panel has actually put into this and how seriously they've actually taken this matter. I'd also like to thank all members of my mayoral team for voluntarily not taking the recommended pay increases, and also to Councillor Merry and Councillor Boschel for joining with myself in taking a pay cut on the current pay bill. So, thank you very much.
Sorry, you're going to. Miranda is going to answer a query.
Chair, through you, I should say, as monitoring officer, I've received written confirmation from all members of the mayoral team and the 2 deputy mayors that they would not take the increase proposed by the independent review panel.
Right. I understand that we're taking this in 2 parts. The first one is the Council is asked to consider the report and recommendation of the Independent Remuneration Panel. Are we in favour of that or against it? Thank you. And the second one is the alternative recommendation which has been proposed by the City Mayor. All in favour, please show. Aye. Thank you. Right. So there is no confusion. We are up to item 10, which is the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and the Salford Local Plan. And you will see at the side of it that this is 10 minutes, Councillor Antipas. And that's yourself and questions and comments. We've got a very tight schedule. We're on time at the moment, so hopefully we won't overrun. So can I now pass you on to the lead member of Planning and Sustainable Development, Councillor Antipas.
think members may be aware that the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework and the local plan, A Fairer City, have both been published. There'll be extensive consultation, there'll be workshops for members, and I'm sure there'll be the opportunity for some robust debate when we come to making the final recommendations following the consultation. But I wanted to take this opportunity to formally make members aware of the publication of these documents, but also to place on record our thanks to the team who've been involved in the production of those documents. I'm sure that anyone who's been a member of this council for any significant length of time will know the tremendous pressure and the hard work that team has been under. Obviously led by Chris Findlay, but also involving Dave Percival, Claire Thorne, Matt Doherty, Jimmy McManus, Steve Davey, Cheryl Marr, Francis Taylor, Amelia Lucas and Gareth Clegg. Not only have they been instrumental in producing our local plan, but they have provided the support for the Greater Manchester team in gathering and providing a lot of the statistical evidence. So they've had to work under tremendous pressure. I think that their work should be acknowledged by us here today. The plan that is being put forward takes forward previous policies on the city to try to make Salford a fairer place in the sense of a nicer, greener place. We've always wanted to bring nature back to the city. For the first time, we have a policy to protect and enhance the Irwell Valley, including support for the 80-hectare City Forest Park. There'll be a new country park in Swinton, protection to the new country park at Cutacre in Littleton, and support for the new wetlands at Castle Irwell also feature in the plan alongside a new park at Greengate. The Green Belt will be extended to cover the Greenway, an area of land linking Wartdin, Worsley and Monton, which has been under threat from developers for many years. Chatmoss will keep its protection and restoration of its precious bogland, damaged by generations of exploitation by private profit, and that will be encouraged by the City Council to make sure that that is restored as part of the Greater Manchester Wetlands Project. We will make our city a fairer place in the sense of being a greener place, but we also want it to be fairer in the sense of being a more just city. We will seek to remedy the injustice of the housing market, which is denying so many young people access to the homes they need. When I was on my way here this morning, I heard on the radio that for teenagers, the top of their bucket list, as it was put, which I thought we were going to say a trip to Disney World, is actually owning a home. And what they were saying is that for us, it was never the top of our list because our generation always anticipated that we would be able to buy a home and live in a home. And that's not true for today's young people. And it's our responsibility to make sure that there isn't an injustice between generations, that we give them the same chances that we had. We will build more homes, including large garden suburbs in Booth Sound and Western Cadishead and Earlham. And on these and other sites, we will double the requirement for affordable housing from 20% to 40%. We also include policies to reduce health inequalities, to address the needs of the elderly, and to ensure homes and infrastructure are suitable for disabled people. We will expect developers to sign up to the Mayor's Employment Charter and to pay a real living wage to help to reduce inequality in the city. I believe that the proposals in the local plan will bring about a fairer city. We've got to think of future generations. And some people ask the question, do we need to build on greenfield sites? The question is, do we need to provide decent homes for the future generations? And if you go to your local primary school, look at the children coming out there. They are the people who will be looking for homes at the time when the plans in this policy are realised. Look at them. They're the people that we're making decisions for today, not the interests of today's generation, but looking to the future. And I'd urge all members to approach this with that in mind.
Thank you, Councillor Antipus. Can I call on Councillor Mashiter, please?
Very quick question, Chair. Councillor Antipus, what do you see to be, well, what do you anticipate to be the greatest challenge for the local plan during its public examination for it to be ratified? Thank you.
Councillor Greedy, you're next. Is yours a question or a comment?
Question first.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions really. Can Councillor Antibus say where he got the information from, included within his published statement, that the people of Boothstown were in agreement with this increased development, particularly in relation, I think, to the Garden suburb? So can he confirm where that information came from? And secondly, can he confirm that the recent statement made by the City Mayor in a press release, which confirmed that we would be protecting green spaces throughout the city, is still the position of this council, and therefore we will not be countenancing development on greenfield sites?
Thank you, Councillor Antipus. Would you like to reply?
I can confirm that the Mayor's demands, which identified specific green sites that we felt were the most valuable sites in the city, should be protected, that they will be protected under the proposals. The second point that Councillor Garrido raises is various meetings of the planning panel, social media, and in emails direct to myself, residents of Boothstown have written to me to say that they are not NIMBYs, they will countenance development as long as that development includes the appropriate infrastructure, such as a primary school and a new road. And you know, I'm very pleased that we've been able to provide that as part of the local plan, and I'm sure it will be welcomed by those people who have written to me. I had an email on the 26th of May 2015 which said the fact that local roads, schools and healthcare are stretched to breaking point is entirely due to the council not investing in infrastructure. The infrastructure should be in place before any new houses are built. That was the demand of local... Oh, this email came from a Mr. Robert Clark, who has since been elected to the council as a representative of Boothstown. So I assume that he's being consistent, that he still believes that, and I'm very pleased that I've been able to give to Councillor Clark exactly what he wanted. The third point, and I think the most serious issue, is about the potential challenges to the plan. There is no doubt that some developers in the city have been deeply disappointed by our proposals. I think the Chair has met with some of those developers recently and passed on their concerns to me. Indeed, I understand that Peel Holdings are reputedly incandescent with rage about our proposals, because one of the things that we've done is protect the Greenway. We're proposing to make it Greenbelt. That was Peel's biggest demand, that we release land there. And the thousands of other homes Peel would want to be building on the Greenbelt. So I imagine at the the public inquiry, then Peel Holdings will make sure that all their lawyers, all their planning consultants are there in force as a challenge to us. I'm satisfied because of the robust way in which we've approached the evidence, and we haven't gone for an option in the local plan and in the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework which increases the amount of land release beyond that which we see as being needed, which was, of course, the demand of the developers. They wanted to go beyond what was needed. We've identified the amount of land which all the evidence points out, will be needed for future generations. So I'm convinced that that is a robust approach. But the greatest threat is something called the Local Plans Expert Group, which is a group which has been established by the Secretary of State for Communities for Local Government to advise the Secretary of State on what should be the appropriate methodology for calculating housing need so it can be consistent across the country. If the Secretary of State takes the advice of that group, then we could be forced to find land for thousands and thousands of more homes. That is the biggest threat, and I would urge everybody in this council chamber to use their influence to try to make sure that what we plan for is what is needed and not what developers want, to make sure that they take market advantage of this. Let's build for need in the future. That's what our plan is, and I call on everybody to support us in that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Antibus is being both mischievous and misleading. Misleading in respect of the emails he refers to and the comments he refers to from Booth Town residents are those which were made about specific planning applications which have already been considered by this council. And the comments made, in fact, were that we should not approve those specific planning applications at that time without the proper infrastructure being in place. Those comments certainly did not relate in any way whatsoever to any future planning applications. And in fact, the people of Booth Town have made it extremely clear that they were not countenance any applications on any further greenfield sites. We've already had enough development on those sites, and what I can advise the Council today, Madam Chair, is that we will be setting a petition going after today's meeting, and that will be submitted to the Council, and it will show that many hundreds, if not thousands of people in Booth Town are against developing on greenfield sites. And they expect the Council, and the City Mayor in particular, to keep to the word and to protect our greenfield spaces. And that includes Greenbelt as well. Thank you.
Can I just say that I've got a large number of people. I've got a large number of people who wish to speak. As I said, we've got two motions on today, one which is due to start at any minute now, and the second one is about due to start at 10:30. Could I just ask if any of these comments could actually be addressed to Councillor Antibus within his allotted time as lead member? I wonder if somebody could show whether they could actually be done under that stage. Councillor Longshaw, thank you very much. Councillor Hines, yep. Councillor Jolley, do you want to do it under this, or do you want to do it under questions to Councillor and comments? No. Councillor Turner? Yeah. Can you do it under questions, please? Councillor Lindy, could you do it under comments? All right. Right, okay, just hold the line up. Sorry, hold the line. Just hang on a moment. I have to say that when this came to the agenda setting, I was very keen that this was given the time, but we hadn't realised that the local plan was going to be in that as well. So I do intend to carry on with this for everybody to speak and to comment, and for Councillor Antrobus to come back. And then we're going to have to look at later on in the agenda. So thank you. Can you bear with me when we get there? Right, so the next person is Councillor Linley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, can I just agree with one small thing that Councillor Antrobus said, which is to echo his thanks to the officers. These are two incredibly complicated, detailed and long pieces of work. And whether we agree with everything or not, we do have to recognise the exceptional amount of work that officers have put in on these plans. They do operate under political direction from elected members, and they've worked extremely hard to get these to the stage of publication. So I just wanted to echo those thanks. I'm sure there will be many other opportunities to talk about everything that's in these documents, and I do hope so. They are possibly the most important documents that we will consider as a City Council. We're talking about the future of our city. One concern that a lot of residents have had, and this will be the same whether you live in Walkden or Broughton or Caddishead or Eccles, is that a lot of residents worry when we carry out consultation events that the proposals are a done deal, that they feel that people will not be listened to. I wondered whether Councillor Antrobus and the City Mayor could assure us that people will be listened to when they make their submissions. And I ask particularly because the City Mayor made a decision this week to proceed with the sale of a plot of green space in Walkden off Hilton Lane, the former St George's playing fields. He made a decision in his property briefing to carry on with the process of selling those sites, even though that site is in the local plan, where we are asking residents to discuss and consult with them on whether we feel that that site is appropriate for development. So I would ask the City Mayor whether he would postpone and pause that process while we actually run a consultation on whether that site is suitable for development. Secondly, we have a set of sites that are in the spatial framework. We have a second set of sites which are in the local plan, which obviously incorporates the spatial framework. But when you go onto the mapping site and when you look at the proposals, there is a third set of sites, which is the assumed housing supply, and that includes sites like the playing field on the Birch Road estate in Walkden South. Now, those aren't part of the local plan, but they are there as assumed housing supply. So what I'd like to ask Councillor Antrobus is, where is the democratic input into those sites? And we've all got them in our wards, those sites that have been assumed to be suitable for housing, and we know that some of them may not be, and some of them would have significant impacts if they were developed. So how do I, as a councillor, how do residents of the city make their views known on those sites which are not part of the consultation, which have never been approved for development by anybody? How do the residents I represent and the residents we all represent actually say whether they think those sites are suitable for development? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Linley. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When this came in front of agenda setting, I did think, like you, Madam Chair, that 10 minutes was not a very long time to discuss the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, but I was under the impression that it was going to be a statement from Councillor Antrobus and it wasn't for the detail. And I still hold the view. I think that was the intention, although you do tend to go on a little. You elaborated it a bit, and here we are where we are. But the other thing I noticed, when I look at the importance of this subject, I didn't even know that the local plan was going to be on there at that time. These are two major things for this city, and I think, I know he keeps members aware, I think most members are aware that there's a local plan and a Greater Manchester. It's the public, it's the people that are affected by this plan that's been designed, and we really need to ensure that they all know about it, that the communication is good, that we go out, and I'm sure that's what you alluded to, because it's the people that are going to be affected. And I haven't read all the pages of the plan, but as far as I can understand, there isn't much detail on the infrastructure. And at the moment, any of you that are driving to this meeting will find that the traffic is appalling. This has been backed up by our MP, who I have to say, on both meetings I had with her, she was very vociferous on the need for some solution, and it's not there. And there are many other things, but I don't want to talk about Peel or anyone else. I think that it's so important that we should, at our next forum, have this as the subject. I really do. I think this would be an ideal thing to put on here, and I think 10 minutes was probably only designed for just this little statement, and we didn't expect to be where we are, but as always happens in this council, things tend to escalate. So I'm going to sit down now, but if Councillor Antrobus and the City Mayor could look at this urgently for a forum on that subject, because we've had forums on worse, much minor subjects in my opinion, but this is the biggest thing that's going to happen in a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Jolly.
There we go. Yeah, I just want to briefly comment, because a debate has started, so I thought I should. I'm on the Greater Manchester Strategy panel from this council, one of the 3 people, and a very large report and presentation came to the panel last week, because this is across the whole of Greater Manchester, and I've got that report in front of me. And it talks here about planning for high levels of economic growth, driving the economy, 227,000 new homes. One thing that we haven't mentioned, strong emphasis on directing new development to brownfield land in urban locations. 80% of the framework is about brownfield, which nobody mentions because it's all greenfield, greenfield, greenbelt, 80% on brownfield. But the need to release land from greenbelt, because the fact of the matter is, and just to comment as well, we are in consultation on that spatial framework now. That is out to public consultation up until the end of the year, the 31st of December, and that will be coming back. But the point is this: if we don't have a proper plan to expand our homes in this way, and some people have said, well, you don't need a plan because of Brexit. The economy is going to tank so much that you don't need any new homes. So all this is going to be moot. Well, I don't think that's how we should be planning in Greater Manchester. But if we don't have a proper plan, if we don't have a proper plan to deal with these issues, then the developers will come at us with their corporate lawyers, with figures which they have which show we need many, many, many more houses, and they will win. And we'll end up with something far beyond this, and to the Tory group here in Salford, you know where that's going to be. So if we don't have a proper plan, if we stick our head in the sand and say we don't have a proper plan because of our concerns over things like Greenbelt, then we will end up with something far in excess of this.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly. Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support what Councillor Antrobus has said. We've spent many, many hours as the mayoral team discussing these issues. We know it will be controversial. There is no question about that. And I understand, of course, members representing their constituents. But the big issue, and Councillor Turner's right, this is a big issue. This is a big issue. and people do need to be consulted and will be consulted. But at the end of the day, we have a housing crisis, like never before. And I would ask the opposition, what is their plans for the future of future generations and young kids wanting to live in the city in decent homes? Councillor Jolly's right. The plan has shown that 80% is on brownfield sites. Do the opposition care about them? Or do the opposition want to see people living better, in less density? Because these are issues that are important. And I think I've said in this council before, when I got my house where I still live, I'd just come out of my time as an apprentice. The majority of people in my road, which I'm now the longest in, when I moved in there was only 2 of us. The street was still being built. 90% of the people that bought those houses were of my age, 21. Most of them, 90% again, had occupations like I had. I'd just come out of my time as an engineer. Wasn't a big, high-flying, well-paid job in that sense. Where today, with a 21-year-old, just come out of the time, in the kind of occupation that I had, getting a mortgage to buy a decent house. It is crucial that we do something on behalf of people that come along. And I can understand the controversies that are going to take place. What I'd rather hear, though, and I don't think I'm going to get it from the opposition, is what their alternatives. What are your alternatives? What is your plan going forward? I can remember Robin Garrido some years ago, when we used to have the consultation on budgets and everything else, commenting to me that people were leaving this city. There was no decent place for them to live. And now it appears that as we start to grow and want people to come in and have decent housing, he has now changed his mind. So yes, let us understand, let us consider the issues that are there. Massive issues going forward. But I'd be more content if the opposition were coming forward, appreciating that, instead of digging their head in the sands and hoping that it would all go away, and making sure that our younger generations that are coming forward, as Councillor Antrobus has said, have got somewhere decent to live. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. Councillor Longshaw.
Wise words from Councillor Hines as ever. I'd just like to say one brief thing. The current Prime Minister said at the Conservative Party conference that there needs to be an honest truth that we need to address. We simply need to build more homes, and it means taking on the NIMBYs who object to new homes, many of whom are sat in this hall. Wise words from the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Councillor Longshaw. Just before you reply, Councillor Antrobus, the monitoring officer... Are you going to leave? Right, you can reply. It's all right. The monitoring officer was going to speak, but...
Thank you very much for those comments. I think Councillor Hines, in particular, supported by Councillor Longshaw, they did what I asked at the very beginning. Because if we go around and ask people, will you sign a petition saying, are you opposed to losing greenfield land? It's dead easy, anyone can do that. Go around with a petition and say, do you want the council to make sure that your children and grandchildren have decent homes to live in? Go down with that petition and see what response you get to that. Because we shouldn't be here today arguing between ourselves, trying to turn it into a party political issue. What we should be doing in this council chamber, our profound main moral responsibility on us is to make sure that our children and grandchildren have the same chances that we've had. And if we don't do that, we fail our children. And we do that making sure that there will be sufficient land to meet that housing need in the future. I'm committed to doing that. But, you know, I object to the suggestion that somehow we are not doing anything to make the city a fairer place in terms of the enormous transformations that we've made in opening up green spaces to people. To save you time later on the agenda, someone was going to ask me a question about the new wetland area that we've created in the Irwell Valley with the Environment Agency to protect the people. Can you imagine that? In the plan, it's going to be designated as a local nature reserve in Broughton, a lower nature reserve in the inner city. And that's what we're doing. We're bringing nature back to the people. And I think that we should be proud of that and we should shout about it and not try to undermine the reputation of this council by implying that we're doing anything other than bringing nature back to the people of this city. And can I just try to address some of the particular issues that have been raised? Councillor Garrido says I was misleading. I deny that. There are people who have said what we want to see is the infrastructure. And what I've said is that people will be pleased for the infrastructure to be going in. Full stop. Councillor Lindley talks about the sites that have been included in the assumptions for the future housing supply. Those are sites that form part of the housing, the 5-year housing supply figure that we annually report on, and those will be, because of course you don't have to allocate land in order for it to be developed. You know, people can develop sites because they are suitable for housing in the first place, and that will be tested at the planning panel when people will be able to discuss particular sites. Councillor Turner asked about the publicity for this. I heard yesterday that there have already been 15,000 visits to the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework website, people looking at the proposals and making notes on it, and we will have a series of workshops for members. I think that will be better than a policy forum because it will allow members to go into details on particular aspects of the local plan. And finally, Councillor Jolly talked about this being a brownfield plan, and it is. You know, if we look at where the future houses are going to go, between 2015 and 2035, we expect Ordsall to be 20,408 new dwellings. Irwell Riverside, 5,267. Boothstown and Ellenbrook, 544. Those figures themselves tell the story. You know, this is a debate not about the few hundred houses in one part of the city. We shouldn't allow ourselves to get trapped into thinking that's all that this is about. It is about making sure that there are the right mix of homes throughout the whole of the city and that we do build a fairer city. Yes, making areas greener. Yes, having policies to make sure that we have a more equal city, but most of all, making sure that our children and grandchildren have the same chances that we've had.
Thank you, Councillor Antrobus. I need to put to the Council. Can you note the statement? Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I now move on to the first of the motions, and that's the increase in state pension age. I understand the proposer of the motion is Councillor Paula Bushell, and that will be seconded by Councillor Kate Lewis, after which I will permit members to ask questions. So can we now move on to this motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm proposing this motion to call on the Government to make fair transitional arrangements for women born on or after the 6th of April 1951 and who have unfairly borne the burden of the increase to the state pension age. This issue is not an issue about creating equality in pension age. What is creating the problem is for women is that in 2011 the Tory-led government accelerated changes to the state pension age for women. Some women have seen their pension age increase by 6 years, and many of the women affected, given this acceleration, did not have enough time to put alternative plans into place. The government's treatment of these women is dreadful. The promised transitional arrangements didn't happen, and many are living in hardship as a result. Women in Salford have contacted their councillors and MPs with their issues, including a resident who at 62 has been put on a work programme and is having to claim unemployment benefit for the first time in her life when she'd worked all her life and paid national insurance. Some women are now caring for elderly relatives or grandchildren or suffer discrimination in the workplace, so struggle to find employment. 284,000 women in the North West will be affected, 98,000 in GM, 8,000 in Salford, and in my constituency, Worsley and Eccles South, 3,700. The fact that thousands of 1950s-born women and their supporters travelled to the demonstration in Parliament highlights just how much of an impact this has had on the lives of women up and down the country. Please support this motion and send a powerful message on behalf of our residents to this government, as other councils have done, to reconsider transitional arrangements for women born after April 1951.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anne Keane was 17 when the Labour government brought in the Equal Pay Act in 1970. In that year, the pay gap was 45%. It would be a further 25 years before part-time women were allowed to join company pension schemes. Despite living through a time of inequality for so many women, Anne looked forward to her retirement. The retirement she fully expected to begin in 2013. That was the date she had planned for, the date she had expected. No one had told her any different. No one told any of the women who were her friends any different. The prospect of Anne's pension not starting in 2013 had never entered conversation. Why? Because no one had bothered to ensure that Anne and all the millions of women like her were told these changes, because no one had bothered to ensure that Anne and all the millions of women like her were told about these changes until it was too late to do much about the situation they found themselves in. Anne Keane was told 30 months before her 60th birthday that she would have to work another 4 years or claim benefits. No additional help would be coming her way as it would have done if she had a state pension. There was no free bus pass, no winter fuel allowance. She was a woman who always believed in equality, but she was also a woman who believed in fairness. To her, failing to give adequate notice or to offer help with a transition was deeply unfair. However, she was not the kind of woman to stand by while she and others suffer this injustice. Some women have been driven to thoughts of suicide due to the financial situation they have found themselves in. Anne went on to start the Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign. It is her and many more feisty women like her whom we must thank for their tenacity and endurance. It is their message of unfairness and injustice which struck a chord with so many people, driving them to action. It is the sense that this situation was so deeply unfair that it led to the creation of the 140-strong all-party parliamentary group in which all parties are represented. It has such a level of cross-party support because it is one of those issues you just feel is wrong. The more deeply the lives and experiences of the WASPI women are understood, your head tells you it is wrong. For the 3,200 women across Greater Manchester who will be affected this year alone, and the estimated 2.5 million in the UK who will be affected by 2026, I second this motion. I ask all those here to support this motion and the hope it will bring to the WASPI women who are continuing their fight for fairness. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I now open the debate to Council. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Turner, just bear with me a second. Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Bolkine. Councillor Lindley. Anybody else? No? Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Turner?
I've just noticed that we're meant to be breaking at 11:15, and in view of the number of speakers, I think a comfort break will be long overdue. Is it possible that the Council will agree to have a break now, or do you want to go straight through, but it could take some considerable time?
Councillor Turner, we're going to do this one, and then I think we'll have a break before the next motion. Thank you.
OK, then, Madam Chair, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask. Well, blame the Tories again. The state pension age has been the subject of at least 4 debates in Parliament, and as Councillor Lewis has given us a little bit of history, I intend to give you some further history, and this is courtesy of the Commons Library. WASPI is mentioned in it. They had a rather large petition that failed. It's become clear since the early 1990s that the state pension age needed to be looked at. Women were retiring at 60, has been said, and there's longer life expectancy than men who retired at 65. So there's no issue about the equalisation that we should all be treated the same in that respect. But I think it was Tory Chancellor Kenneth Clarke that announced in 1993 budget that he intended to act, hence the Pension Act of 1995. Labour came to power in 1997, you may well remember that, I do. They at first resisted any increase in the state pension age, but in 2002 they commissioned a gentleman by the name of Lord Turner, no relative I have to say, but I haven't given up, to produce a report. His first report was in 2004. That stated that an increase in the state pension age would be needed. It was the obvious. In 2006, Labour, who had been in government nearly 9 years, I would think by my maths, finally supported Turner's findings and proposed a phased introduction from 2024. By 2010, of course, things were very different. Many were calling for the acceleration of this, and this is where we have the 2011 Act by the coalition government. But one of those calling for a speeding up was, of course, Lord Turner. Again, I stress it wasn't me. The country's finances were in a worse state in 2010, so we won't go into the reasons why we think that might have been the case. One of the complaints made, of course, was the changes outlined in the 1995 Act were not being communicated, it's that old word again, communication, were not being communicated to those people that were likely to be affected. It is worth noting that the House of Commons Works and Pensions Committee stated in their report in March of this year regarding the communications, more could and should have been done, especially between 1995 and 2009. Now, who was in government for most of that time? It would be the proposer and the seconders party. So they must bear quite a large share of the blame there for not communicating. Coming to the motion in front of us, the Deputy Statutory Mayor and the Chief Whip have rather missed the boat, in my opinion. They seek to blame the government. I would have rather the Council debate things that, in my opinion, fall within our remit, and there are quite a few. It may surprise you to know that most of the content and the language used in this motion I cannot agree with. The motion states, amongst other things, retirement plans have been shattered, devastating consequences. It's at best exaggerated, at worst pure nonsense. I am sure there are millions of pensioners that always realised they needed to save for their retirement so that the interest on their savings would supplement the state pension, not rely solely on a state pension. Alas, interest rates are now 0.25%, has blown that out of the water. They may have reason to worry, they might even feel devastated at it. As I said earlier, there has been much debate in the House with a lot of effort made by Rachel Reeves. You know Rachel Reeves? She was the person that said Labour would be tougher on cutting the benefits bill than the Tories. She was the shadow minister then. Barbara Keeley, Owen Smith have all chipped in. It has been made abundantly clear, even by the current minister, that the government has no intention of revisiting this subject. They have listened to all the different fractions and they've made their decision, and that's it. I really can't imagine that a letter from Salford City Council is going to change their position. It is also worth noting that the current state pension will be £155 a week, providing you've got the 35 years qualifying stamps or credits, and it's this government that has pledged to honour the triple lock guarantee until at least 2020. So it's the Conservative government that look after the pensioners and not the party opposite. I urge you not to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, Madam Chair, I am one of the women that would be affected by this. I was born in the early 1960s. I just wish to make two short points. Firstly, that the women affected will also suffer an unexpected delay in receiving free bus passes and fuel allowances. Those are two benefits which would have greatly assisted them in this age of austerity and financial difficulties. The opposition say that they set out to help people who are hard-working. Well, I say that that's completely untrue, because many of these middle-aged women from all strands of society, including middle-aged people, women in Worsley, they've contributed to society. They've worked very hard for many years. Most of them have paid enough national insurance contributions to have received their pension at 60, and now they're being penalised. To conclude, I would say that their considerable contribution to society should be applauded or at least respected, whereas to my mind the Tories are deriding their contribution.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Can Councillor Wolkine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm coming at this from a different angle altogether. I was born on the 14th of December 1951. So if you actually work that out, in 28 days' time, I'm 65 and I'm going to enjoy my pension because I've got a full pension. I managed over since working in 1968, never thinking that I would get to age 65, and I think very young people think when they start work that 65 seems such a long way away. But certainly when I got to my early 50s, I began to think about what I've got to do when I get to 65. And I planned to be in a situation that I've got no debt. Next year my mortgage will be paid off. I will be able to shut my door at night, and hopefully in a few years' time, when I finally decide to retire, I will be in a position that I can go and see my grandchildren in London. I can possibly go on 1 or 2 holidays a year because I've made that provision. What this Act has done, and what the opposition have miserably failed to realise, that many women in their early 50s have been doing the same thing as me, starting to plan for retirement. But what they were doing was starting to plan for retirement at the age of 60. And they've been totally refused this chance. I'm not saying that Labour was not guilty when we were in power, but what has happened in the last 5 years is that it was passed through Parliament in such a way that the communication to these people, these women that were going to receive a pension, were never given the opportunity of planning for a proper retirement. And as has already been said, many of them have had to seek help from the state because they have wanted to retire and have had pressure on work to leave their jobs. So what we're actually getting at, and I would ask the opposition to support this motion and not think about what the cruelty that they've actually been saying, is that we have to look forward and help the women of this country that have served this country, like myself, maybe for over 40 years, and on that basis they deserve their pension, and they deserve their pension now, not when they're 66 or 67.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkine. Councillor Linley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly in response to one of the things Councillor Bolkine just said, if employers are pressuring their employees to retire, that is a disgrace and it is illegal and it should be called out. And that is what we need to be doing regardless of this debate. This is a really tough motion actually, because I do understand where it is coming from and I do understand the concerns expressed. But actually what we need is a mature approach to how we deliver pensions. We are living longer, much longer, and we are living longer with more complicated medical conditions, difficult medical conditions. There are millions of people alive today who would not have survived even 20 or 30 years ago, but are now living and thriving. And that's a problem of success. That's a success for this country. It's a success for humankind. But it does present us with a problem, because what we used to pay in for our retirement no longer pays the bills. We are expecting to get more for the same amount of money. And actually, if we have a mature debate about our pension provision, we have to accept that one of three things has to happen. Either we have to work longer, either we have to pay in more over our working lives, or we have to expect that we will get out less when we retire. Now, what is actually going to happen, and there is, a broad consensus in principle, at least I think across the political parties, that what will actually happen is the most politically palatable combination of all those three things. We will have to work a little bit longer, we will have to pay in a little bit more over our working lives, and we will probably get a little bit less out when we retire. That's the only way it's going to work. So I have a lot of sympathy with the motion, but I listened to what Councillor Fletcher said. And if we accept this motion and we go back and make changes, every single word that Councillor Fletcher said applies to the people who come just after that. They're the ones who have also worked hard all their lives, who have also made their contributions, and they'll be the ones who have to work longer when the people before them have been able to retire at 60 or 61. And I listened before when we were talking about the planning debate, and Councillor Hines talked about his apprentice who started work at 16. Could they have 15, my apologies, Councillor. Could a 15-year-old apprentice now afford a mortgage and a deposit for a house? And the answer, of course, as he said, is no. But at the same time, what this motion says is that a 15-year-old now, when are they going to be working to? 68? 70? 72? We have to bite the bullet on the pension age. The only way that we are going to be able to provide for our elderly people is to make some of these difficult decisions. And wherever we put that cut-off, whoever comes after it is going to feel that it's unfair. They will, and it is unfair, but it's the only way it's going to work. And if we accept this motion, then all we are doing is moving that unfairness onto the people who were born 5 years after, the people who were born 10 years after. And we're certainly moving that unfairness onto the people who are being born now and who are entering the job market now, who will end up working well into their 70s, probably, in order to pay for today's pensions. That's not an easy message. It's difficult. It's tough, and I can understand why people want to shy away from that, but it's the only way it's going to work. So, with regret, I can't support this motion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lindley. Councillor Weir, and before that, can I just say that after Councillor Sharp, we won't be taking any more speakers. So it's Councillor Weir.
Thanks, Chair. I didn't expect to be so soon. I have to say that about Les Turner's contribution, when I wasn't going to rise until I heard that, is that I expected this to be the response, that basically retirement age has to go up, both parties are doing it, so you shouldn't make it a political issue. But it is, because the core to this is the acceleration in the retirement age which occurred under the Tory government in 2011, which was a cost-cutting exercise and was disingenuous in the extreme. Under the original formula, which actually was quite well publicised, good God, when I worked for the DWP, I saw enough stuff go across my desk over the years, and all the people that I know, women of approximately my age, in their early 60s, they all knew. They'd worked out the original formula and how it was going to affect them, and they planned on that basis. The change was disingenuous because what the government said is they wanted to put the retirement age up to 66 rather than 65, and that they had to do it by 2020 because that was an EU directive. That was disingenuous because what the EU directive said was it had to be equalised by 65. The original, by 2020. The original formula was a 2-for-1. Every year the retirement age went up 6 months. They could easily have rolled out that till 2020 and then rolled it on for another 2 years to make it 66. And there is a pause after it reaches 66. No reason why they shouldn't have done that. The reason they did it was a cost-cutting austerity exercise to accelerate it. Pure and simple. So what's the effect of this? The problem is it is now moving so fast, and that aspect was very badly publicised. It's moving so fast that women who were approaching what they thought was their retirement age find it disappearing over the hill, and they're only catching up with it so slowly that it's putting back a very long time when they're going to retire. Example, 2 examples, and then I'll sit down. I have in front of me the formula, which I've Googled up. A woman who today is just over 63, who was born a couple of months ago, will be 63 and a half next spring. In 2017, under the original formula, that would be the date they got their retirement pension, because it would have been 7 years and it would have gone up by 3.5 years to 63 and a half. They will now get their retirement pension in March, not 2017, but 2018. That's 1 year's delay, £6,000-7,000, which has been dropped on them after they'd already made plans on the original formula. Even worse, in 2018, the retirement age under the original formula was supposed to be 64. A woman who is 64 in March, April 2018 would have got their pension. Now such a person will get their pension in September 2019, over 15 months later. And that's the problem. That's £10,000 for many people. And that's the problem. It's the acceleration that's the problem. It's the lack of publicity of that acceleration which has caused considerable difficulties for many women in their early 60s. And that was purely done by the Tories. It was done on a false prospectus, and it was done quite quietly with lack of publicity to the people themselves, and that is the issue here, and that is, I'm afraid, a political issue with this government.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak actually either until I heard Councillor Turner and then Councillor Lindley. I have made myself some notes so I can remember what I wanted to say. I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure that you've actually read the motion that we're debating. And if you have, then I think perhaps there's some training needs about understanding what the issue is that we're talking about. If I read the motion to you, it clearly says, it is not the pension age itself that is disputed. It is widely accepted that women and men should retire at the same time. The issue is that the rise in women's state pension age has been too rapid and has happened without sufficient notice being given to women affected. So I think we've been quite clear. I don't know why we've had so much time talking about the actual age itself. It's
I actually said when I spoke there wasn't any problem with the equalisation of the ages. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you all heard it. Did Councillor Stone not hear that?
okay. So the issue isn't just about communications issues, it's the fact that some women were not notified by the government of a significant change to their retirement age, that they'd have to work for a further 6 years before they can retire, before they can claim the pension and all the associated benefits that we've heard about, such as the winter fuel allowance, such as bus passes, etc., which have a big financial implication. I think, you know, they've rightly planned to retire at a certain age, but that's been increased by 6 years without them being told. Therefore, their plans have been shattered. The whole point is that they were not told. I don't understand what's confusing about that. To hear a case study from Councillor Lewis about one lady's situation, and to hear that some women have even contemplated suicide because of the financial impact that this is having on them, and then to say that it's nonsense, I think is an absolute disgrace. I think to say that we shouldn't be discussing this issue is also a disgrace when we've been told that there are 8,000 women in our city that this affects. I don't care whether the government have said they've made their mind up. There's 8,000 of our residents that have been affected by this, and absolutely, we should be talking about it. We should be writing to government. We should be going down to the government with those WASPy women and demanding that transition arrangements are put in place to support them through this difficult time that's been caused by them not being told of that 6-year change. So I suppose I'm just saying that I wholeheartedly support the motion, and I hope that members will vote for it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Can I have Councillor Sharp, the last speaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if most of you have realised, but I'm not a woman, and I'm not coming up to 60 yet, so it won't affect me personally. But I don't argue this point from a point of self-interest. but from a point of political excellence and political good, really. That's the way I'm coming from. I don't think it's worth stressing any further the need that it's not the equalisation of state pension that's the issue, and I think I personally realise, being so young, that I'm going to have to be as old as this council chamber before I get my pension. But it's the speed and aggression which the government are pushing it on at this moment. I'd just like to come back to what Councillor Lindley said, with if women are being unfairly dismissed at too early an age, that they should take that up against their employer. Wasn't it this government that did cuts to employment tribunals to make it harder for women to go to the employment tribunal and argue against their employer? So not only are they getting stung for having the pension ages increased at such a fast level, but they don't have the money in the pockets to take their employer to a tribunal. So state pensions are now being attacked. They've attacked tuition fees and rose that. Is there anyone that they're not going to attack? Benefits, disabled? I think it's getting... In fact, the only people they're not going to attack are the top 1% who they've continually given tax breaks to. And I'm sure Councillor Clarkson there is agreeing with me and sending it to his colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Boshall, you wish to reply?
Thank you, Chair. So many of members on this side of the room have said some of the things I was going to say, and I thank them for that. But again, to reiterate, this is not an issue of equal pay. It is about the acceleration. And Councillor Turner, you did mention the Turner Commission. They did recommend at the time 15 years' notice, and Saga, who was also on that, recommended 10 years. Many have been given very little notice at all, let alone 10 or 15 years in which to plan. 100 MPs, including Tories, handed in a petition on the 11th of October supporting this campaign, and other councils, including cross-party support, have passed this motion, including in Wigan quite recently. So the Lee Journal explains that this is the women of Lee are very supportive of this motion and are really pleased that this was passed by cross-party, including Conservative councillors. I'm sure the 8,000 women in Salford will appreciate the comments and empathy displayed today here, but not... And will be shocked by members of the opposition who are saying they're not going to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Boshall. Can I now move to the vote on the motion? Can I ask all those in favour please show? All those against? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. I do intend now to adjourn for 10 minutes, and can I just remind you that in the Mayor's Parlour that we're selling Christmas cards, candles and plants kindly donated by Councillor Ord, so please try and pop in either now or at the end of Council. Before we start, can I just make one comment to everybody? A few of you have been actually moving your mics and putting them quite close to you. And I don't know whether anybody heard, but we had a bit of a twittering noise. It's actually nothing to do with the mics. It's actually your clothes vibrating against the mics. And also, no, whatever you do, don't do that. Don't think I could stand that this morning. So could you just actually not move the mics? They will pick them up if you stand as they are and just go a bit closer, but don't start pulling them towards you because it is making a problem. And can I also ask, I mean, we're looking at the time now, it's 11:30, 11:25. I don't think we're going to be finished by 12:30. Can I ask if everybody's prepared to go on till 1:45? Yep. Everybody okay with that? Thank you very much indeed. So can we... Sorry, did somebody say... Sorry. Councillor Lewis, did you want to... Sorry. Did you want to say something? Sorry. Thank you very much. The next motion is no place to call home. That's going to be moved by Councillor Paul Longshaw, and I think it's to be seconded by Councillor Kelly. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Turner, you wanted to ask something?
I have been reminded that I should stand when speaking, so I apologise for not doing earlier. Which motion, which paragraph, starting this motion?
The last paragraph.
What would you like the ruling on?
I would like to know the validity of that, whether it can actually be done in this way.
Salford Council will support a position that every home that is subject to right to buy will only be sold subject to an initial like-for-like replacement, and will urge the government to consider this approach. The Council can look to support a position of a particular kind. Clearly it's bound by the law in a broader ruling. The Council can certainly make that statement. Yes, they're seeking to confirm that from now and to maintain social housing, the Council aren't proposing to bring a unilateral claim of any kind.
Councillor, I'm just going to... Councillor Ferguson, I'm running this council. Councillor Turner, you will have to wait until the motion has been moved and seconded, and then you can move your amendment. Thank you. And I have to say, I don't need anybody to tell me how to run this council. Thank you very much. The motion will be moved by Councillor Paul Longshaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for the entertainment before I rise to my feet. I'm pleased to say that Salford University, Unison, Crisis, Shelter, Salford Strategic Housing Partnership, Greater Manchester West Mental Health, Great Places Housing Association, Salix Home, City West Housing Trust and a Happy Monday have supported, endorsed the intentions and the principles of this motion. A few weeks ago, I circulated a message to all councillors about some of the current issues and challenges that we face in this city regarding people without a home. And may I thank those councillors who returned support and positive comments on this issue, particularly Councillor Warmasham, Councillor Jones, Councillor Stone, Councillor Hudson, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Collinson, Councillor Connor and Councillor Weir. All of their comments and advice helped to lead into this motion, and it gives me a good sense of satisfaction to say that the private members' bill, the Homelessness Reduction Bill, which was outlined in the message, is now en route to the Public Bill Committee. The bill had its second reading on the 28th of October, and it was a bill that was supported by all parties across the House. In terms of context, we have a dysfunctional housing market. Rough sleeping has doubled nationally since 2010. The Chartered Institute of Housing has predicted that 350,000 social rented homes will be lost in the system by 2020. Crisis and Shelter, a well-established and well-respected organisation, state that 117 families a day are currently being made homeless. They state that 120,000 children will be homeless this Christmas. They estimate that by 2020, 1 million people will be homeless in the UK. That's the size of this city times 4. Locally, we have a dysfunctional housing market. We have seen an increase in demand on homelessness and the support team's activity over the last 3 years by 70%. 1,600 people came into their service last year who didn't have a home or were about to lose their home. We placed 250 families in temporary accommodation in the first 6 months of this year. Our objective housing need assessment has calculated that we need around 750 new, additional, low-cost rented homes per year in the city to meet need, not demand, meet need. Locally, we have a dysfunctional housing market. So I promise I won't do this often, but I will quote the Prime Minister again in terms of her wise words. There is an honest truth that we need to address. We simply need more homes, and that means using the power of government to step in and repair the dysfunctional housing market. But will the current Prime Minister do the right thing? As she was part of successive cabinets that did the wrong thing, and they helped to create dysfunctional housing markets. So I welcome the Homeless Reduction Bill, which was supported after passionate speeches from across the Chamber, and the Government confirmed their support of the bill. Marcus Jones, DCLG Minister, said the Government will meet the costs of the bill for local authorities, and he said the bill would see innovative approaches to homelessness, and he said the Government is proud to support this important bill. He said, one person without a home is one too many. There remains some concerns with the bill, however, with many pointing to the fact that there needs to be a properly funded model in place for local authorities, as well as ensuring that more low-cost rented homes are provided. Many have pointed to practices in Scotland and in Wales where the direction of travel on housing and homelessness has been a lot more positive. They're right. This is real. Sue, a school teacher in Earlham, young child, lives in a rented home with her partner. Last couple of weeks, she was served with a notice to end her tenancy that she had there in the private rented property. And the reason why she was told to leave was because the owner wished to sell the property. She was not in rent arrears. She had not had any issues with managing a tenancy. She was asked to leave. So Sue, in Earlham, school teacher, her and her family will be out on the streets in the middle of December. We have John, aged 75, Navy veteran. John, 5 years ago, was found for the first time in his life to have no home. He lived in his car for 9 months. 70-year-old Navy veteran living in his car for 9 months. He went to our housing support team. He got a place. David, 68. David lived in a sheltered scheme until he was evicted for rent arrears, which perhaps could have been avoided. David loved that place so much, he actually lives in a cardboard box in a car park next to that shelter scheme, and he's been living there for 1 year. Cade, aged 19. He lives in a bed and breakfast that's not in this city, it's out of the city, because bed and breakfasts are full. He lives there with no support network. He's been applying for houses, he's made 30 bids. He's been applying for jobs, he's made 20 applications for a job. He wants to learn, he wants to go to the Open University. He can't do that until he's got a settled place. Adam, aged 19. He had an upheaval in his life and was in care. He found a place, he was found without a place to call home. Adam lived in the foyer for a while, and I'll use his words, he hated it. He left. he found himself on the streets. He went to a night shelter. He hated it. He ended up sleeping in the car park of a supermarket. He hated that. He worked with the housing advice team and he got a place to call home. And he's loving it. That's his words. He's so proud of having a place for his own and he's doing the best to do it up. And he's not got that much money, but he's trying his best. He only lives around the corner. Last week we did the Rough Sleepers verification count, and in Bulow Park we found Don, aged 19, bedding down for the night, freezing cold, shattered, hungry, scared. We managed to find a place for him that night, but I don't know where he is today. I started with Sue, and going on with Carol. Carol lived in a private rented house, just like Sue. She had 2 teenage boys. She was a nurse at the local hospital. Just like Sue, the landlord decided to serve notice, which is an eviction, to say that they wanted to sell the property. So Carol used her own money to move from place to place, from hotel to hotel room, to stay with people in spare rooms in the conservatories. She was there for months and months and months, moving from one place to another. She managed to keep her job down. She managed to keep her boys going to school. All these people are just a handful of 1,600 people that came into our service last year. As I said, the Homelessness Reduction Bill gives us hope. It lets us build on that hope, and we must seize the moment. These people are owed. These people are owed dignity. People need to have a place to call home. People need support. Homes should be there for all. All of us can find ourselves suddenly in need. We can all fall ill. We can all of a sudden find that our loved one no longer loves us anymore, or that our employer doesn't want us anymore. We can all struggle with making ends meet. We can all of a sudden have no place to call home. The bill is welcomed, and the previous administration of the Conservative government, I must say, enacted some of the most damaging pieces of welfare and housing legislation ever. The current administration needs to unravel those mistakes and heal their self-made housing disaster. But while they try and do that, people are waiting for too long. People are being hurt. The government has made some good noises, but ministers are set to spend around £2 billion less this year on housing nationally than a year under Labour. The country deserves a proper plan for fixing the housing disaster, not hot air. The government needs to make good their previous short-sighted cuts. But will they? As is now, they are making our current homeless situation far worse by retaining the bedroom tax, by continuing with social security cuts, by intending to introduce shared room rates for people under the age of 35, and expanding local housing allowances to impact on pensioners, vulnerable and the people in most need in this city, at the same time as continuing to deploy their sanctions of hurt. This week's shelter is 50. There's a series of exhibitions that took place. There was one in Manchester, and it had pictures taken by a famous photographer, Nick Hedges, who took pictures 50 years ago when shelter started. Some of those images that were captured included people in Salford that were homeless 50 years ago. I'll complete the move by drawing on a quote from Nick about what he said about his work in his exhibition. Although these photographs have become historical documents, they serve to remind us that secure and adequate housing is the basis of a civilised urban society. The failure of successive governments to provide for it is a sad mark on society's inaction. The photographs should allow us to celebrate progress, yet all they can do is haunt us with a sense of failure. Councillors, in years to come, let's not allow the future people of this city to look back on these images that are up here, real images of people just about surviving in this city. Instead, let them celebrate the progress that we made by being brave enough that we have started today to make a change, because we have said enough is enough. We can make big change. Thank you.
Thank you. And if that was somebody's phone, could you please turn it off? Thank you, Councillor Longshaw. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no hesitation in seconding this motion, as I myself, many years ago, found myself homeless through personal circumstances. I would echo the points that Councillor Longshaw has made, and we still have a long way to go before this bill becomes law. And we as Salford councillors, the representatives of the people of this great city, need to be there every step of the way to help make sure the change happens. I would like to place on record the fantastic work that all the teams and organisations of Salford do for those that need the support. Cannon and Mrs Wyatt, Loaves and Fishes, Emmaus, Big Life, LifeShare, the Booth Centre, the Bowers Trust, the Veterans Service, Salvation Army, many housing associations, Salix Homes, Women's Centre, Greater Manchester West, Mental Health, Manchester Mission, Housing Justice, Coffee for Craig, Mustard Tree and the Worsley Cares. If councils and organisations get all of the funding needed to make it work, the Homeless Reduction Bill will help put an end to the housing injustice once and for all. As Paul said, Marcus Jones has been brave enough to say that government will meet the cost of the bill, and we must hold him to account on this. We must support our MPs, and through our collective lobbying, through our joint connections with ministers of the states, through our joint connections with ministers of states on this issue. It is clear that our homeless and housing options are facing a range of challenges and significant pressures. I will move to outline these in more detail if necessary. These would present significant issues which would require a service response, and we should ensure that this is done. However, these pressures are being applied simultaneously, representing, in effect, a perfect storm in this area which is unsustainable and will remain so without big change. This motion has been endorsed by Unison, as Paul said, the University of Salford Strategic Housing Partners. We seek every funding opportunity locally and nationally to ensure that we provide adequate prevention service provision now and to gear up for the implementation of the Homeless Reduction Bill. Stand behind and the asks within this motion as outlined by Councillor Longshaw. Again, enough is enough, and we can together make big change. I have no hesitation in seconding this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Before we debate this motion, can I call on Councillor Turner, who I think wants to move an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to move an amendment to this so that 90% we have consensus on, we can agree. But the part that we can't agree, I would like removed, which is the last paragraph. That part we can't agree. We think the government's position is, ambition is to do that, and we don't see any reason for that to be included. It's as almost if people don't want the right to buy, but I must be wrong there.
Just a minute. Have we got a seconder for that motion? Amendment, sorry.
Yes, Madam Chair. And in fact, I was going to reserve my right to speak. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm not going to do it because I think all that would result in is a political debate on the amendment, where I would then be coming back on comments made by other members. And I really would prefer this to be dealt with as a non-political, cross-party decision. I'm saddened that I have to get up and second this amendment, because I would have much have preferred to have been able to support every single element of this motion. And there's only one element that I can't support, and that is the final paragraph which Councillor Turner has referred to when he moved the amendment. And it's more specifically the part of that paragraph that says will only be sold subject to an initial like-for-like replacement. Well, first of all, despite the legal ruling, I'm afraid, earlier, we don't believe that that is a legal position. We don't believe, even though we're asking the government to consider it, we're not making that decision. We're nevertheless asking them to make a decision which at this point in time is not legal. So that is one reason why we want to move the amendment to delete that paragraph. The second reason is that we believe that the government is actually doing something very similar. In fact, the government policy, in fact, is to replace housing stock which has been sold and to provide funds to enable that to be done. The difference is that this is not linked to specific sales. So in other words, we're not saying to Mr Jones, who lives on Eccles Old Road, you know, I'm sorry, you can't actually buy this yet, you know, until we've actually found another house or built another house to replace it. And I think that's what this paragraph is actually referring to. So those are the reasons. Can I just, and I know we'll be debating the motion, I hope, in fact, it is the amended motion that we'll be debating. So I will make, depending on what happens, I will make some comments. But can I just plead with members of this council chamber today, right? We don't want to make this a political issue. Every single paragraph, bar that last one, we totally support, right? I'm not going to start referring to what Labour governments have done or not done in the past, right? But I too understand what homelessness is about, Councillor Kelly, because my wife and I were made homeless in the early 90s when we lost our business. And we couldn't get any help, and we had to go out and we had to find something to rent very, very quickly. So we know what it's like, right? When, you know, I agree with everything Councillor Longshaw has said. I'm sorry that Councillor Longshaw finds it funny. It wasn't funny to us at the time, as I'm sure it just isn't funny to all the people that you've mentioned this morning. And I totally have sympathy with all of those people. So I really ask...
Is this a point of order or a point of explanation? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do not find it funny at all, Councillor Garrido. Please retract that comment. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I was speaking about that, he was laughing. As far as I'm concerned, that means he thought it was funny. I do not retract. Can I come back to the members of this council? Please support this amendment. It doesn't do anything to reduce the value of what's being proposed, but it does mean that we can send a message to the government that the whole of this council is supportive of measures which are being taken and believe, if need be, that they need to be strengthened. So please support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Greeder. We are now going to debate the amendment. Does anybody want to speak on the amendment?
We need to be clear what the amendment says. The amendment is to remove the last paragraph of the motion.
Yes, can I just check? What you're saying, Councillor Turner and Councillor Greedo, is that you wish that from this motion we'll seek to confirm that until consider this approach. The whole of that paragraph you wish to delete? Yes. Right. Right. So, so I've got Councillor Mullin. Do you want to speak on the debate, or do you want to speak on the amendment? Right. Thank you, Councillor Merry. Councillor Antrobus.
Councillor Stone. I don't know about people.
Notice some very embarrassed looks on the faces of the Conservatives whilst this motion was being debated. And I don't blame them, quite frankly, for being embarrassed about that, because I think this council should know the truth about how we attempted to actually find a consensus in terms of this particular motion. I mean, I'd like to start by saying I'm quite surprised at the MP who was actually sponsoring this bill. I knew Bob Blackman at university, and I suspect many of that on that side also know Bob Blackman. I have to say, I think Bob Blackman's views generally was that he thought Genghis Khan was a dangerous left-winger, actually, in terms of his approach. And we now find ourselves with our Conservative group to the right of somebody who, even in Conservative terms, was a definite right-winger. And the reason I'm surprised by all of this is that when we actually put this motion together, when Paul worked on this particular motion, we did like a consensus, and actually Councillor Collinson was going to second this motion. And we thought, at last we've got Conservatives who actually understand the issue of homelessness and how it affects people. Then we had a situation when we were told, oh no, we can't support that. We've got some concerns. Right, so we said, OK, let's try and find a way of drafting this final paragraph so that we can meet these concerns. And Paul went away and drafted it, and I'll come on to that in a second. But the reality of the situation was they didn't really have an interest in that. They were looking for ways out of supporting this particular motion. Because what did we get back? Oh, we can't agree to anything until we've had a group meeting. And I thought, well, maybe they'll contact us after the group meeting and explain to us what the issues are. Maybe they'll try and negotiate us. No, they're not interested in that. They're interested in making a silly point in this council chamber as we speak at the moment about something that is very real to a lot of people here, about people in my ward who are at the mercy of unscrupulous private landlords who don't actually care about their welfare, who are left in that situation because they've actually been made homeless for other reasons. I feel very strongly about this. I feel appalled by the attitude of the Conservative group. And what made it even worse was saying, oh, we don't understand the legal advice. I can't understand why they don't understand. The legal advice was absolutely clear and absolutely straightforward. It is perfectly possible for the council to say, OK, we're going to comply with the law, but we're going to campaign to actually change that law, and we're going to campaign for government to take account of our particular circumstances. That's what the legal advice said. Come on, right? Actually show some backbone for a change. Actually show some ability to fight for the people of Salford, even if they don't live in Worsley and Booth Town, and actually stick up for the ordinary people of this city, join with your fellow Tory MPs and support this particular motion.
Can I just remind everybody that we are debating the amendment and not the motion. And if you've actually spoken on the motion now, I'll have to look at whether you can actually come back and speak on the full motion. So can I just remind everybody who's going to speak now, we are debating the motion, the amendment to the motion. So can I call Councillor Antibus?
I just want to support Councillor Merry's point. The objection seems to me that they think that the last paragraph may be unlawful. We have had a legal ruling that it is lawful. Very clear legal ruling that it is lawful. Therefore, you can support the final paragraph. And if you persist in not supporting it, then it will be clear to the whole world that that is just a fiction for opposing the and it will show that your sincerity and your attempt to be genuine about this issue is also a fiction.
Thank you, Councillor Antibus. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak against the amendment. I'm extremely disappointed that we're having to actually have the motion today anyway, when you look at the significant implications for our residents who are facing homelessness in the city, the turmoil and distress it causes, in particular when children and families are involved, moving schools, moving away from communities and friends, the impact on educational outcomes, on health and well-being, all the things that we've, the actual real life implications that we've heard from Councillor Longshaw this morning. Excuse me. Sorry. And I think, when you look at the amount of people affected and those individual stories, you can't help but be shocked by the sheer volume of people that this is affected across the city, with more people set to be affected with caps to benefits and other implications that are actually going to make this a bigger problem. But I think, once again, it seems to me that the opposition have failed to grasp the point of the motion or fully read it and understand it. And actually, by the by, that was a point I was making to Councillor Longshore when Councillor Garrido was on his feet, and perhaps that might be of what the reaction that Councillor Garrido saw across his face. If we read the actual last paragraph, it says, from now on, this council will support a position that every home is subject to right to buy, will only be sold subject to a like-for-like replacement, and will urge the government to consider this approach. And what's really important is the recognition that replacement needs to be on a like-for-like basis. There is absolutely no point at all in replacing a three-bedroomed house with a one-bedroom flat. We've talked earlier this morning, we could debate for hours the reasons and the contributing factors towards homelessness, but we did talk and acknowledge this morning that we have a housing crisis nationally and locally. So therefore, one of the things we need to do to address that is replace on a like-to-like basis. So in addition to speaking against the amendment, sort of going further, I know that we have members sitting here today who are on the boards of organisations such as City West and Salix, and I'd urge them to take this motion to them, in particular that last paragraph, and get them to confirm that they adopt that position as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, really, that I have to say I take exception to what Councillor Murray has said about the fact that we don't care. We do care. I have been involved very, very extensively, as Councillor Connor will know, with the Supporting People's programme for many years. I'm a trustee of Emmaus. I understand homelessness. I understand mental health issues. I understand how people, through actually no fault of their own, can end up in a homeless situation. And I very, very much wanted to support this motion. But because of the last paragraph, I feel that I can't, and we can't on this side support it. And I'm hoping that when you come to take a vote, you'll see what we are going to do. But I just feel, I'm very sorry that Councillor Murray has said that we don't care on this side, because we do. And yes, the majority of us do live in nice houses, we do live in nice areas. That doesn't mean that we haven't got any sympathy or empathy for people who find themselves in a difficult situation. Of course we care. We wouldn't be doing this job if we didn't. And I really would like Councillor Murray to retract what he said. Thank you.
Councillor Murray and everybody else, we cannot have cross the council chamber. Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, firstly, I'd like to echo Councillor Collinson in both her sentiment that it's actually slightly offensive that somebody who I actually regard out of this chamber as
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. City Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the like-to-like issue, let's be clear that the reason why that was in the motion was in response to a government policy in terms of replacing properties on a one-for-one basis. We have concern with your government, and what you've clearly done here, which has been quite interesting to observe, is you've almost decontextualised the motion. It's your government that brought in the National Planning Policy Framework. It's your government that's scrapping grants for social housing landlords to actually build more housing. It's your government that brought in the bedroom tax. It's your government that is imposing austerity and local government cuts on this local authority. It's your government that brought in the 1% cut to registered providers, which when you look at it in real terms, it's more like 3 to 4% cut. And it's your government that brought in the right to buy. And since the right to buy, there has been a chronic undersupply of council housing and affordable and social housing in this country, which has led to a housing bubble, which we are now seeing the problems of. So let's get this right. This is a political issue, and it's your government that, by and large, are responsible for the absolute mess we find ourselves in to date. And to say you care, great, fantastic, but demonstrate that to the people of this city by campaigning on these issues now.
Can we now take the vote on the amendment? The amendment was to delete the final paragraph of the motion. Can I ask for those who are in favour of deleting that, please show. Thank you. Those against? The motion has failed. The amendment, sorry, has failed. Can I now go forward in discussing, debating the full motion? And Councillor Mullen, can you go first, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking in support of this motion because as a ward councillor this year, I have had 4 cases and they've all had the same thing in common, and that is working families with 30 days notice. I believe it's called Section 21, which gives the right for any landlord to put you on the street. You may not have done a single thing wrong. You may be an ideal tenant, but because whatever reason, the landlord can just put you out. And I've had 4 cases this year, and I suspect that will rise unless we make a stand. So for that reason alone, and for the people of Barton, I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. Councillor Hines. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hines. Councillor Garrido.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regrettably, the amendment was lost, and we're now on the main substantive motion. Can I just come back on 1 or 2 points? I think I understand Councillor Longshaw. He's not been on the council very long, and he's probably not too politically aware. But he did refer. He did refer to the fact that this government hadn't built enough social housing. Can I just remind Councillor Longshaw that the previous Conservative government and coalition government actually built more social housing than the previous Labour government. So I think you want to get your facts straight there. The Conservative government and the coalition government built more social housing than the previous Labour government, and that's a fact. You can check the figures. So let's be quite clear as to who supports those who need social housing and those who don't. Scrapping of grants. Yes, we have seen a cutback from the HCA on the grants to registered providers, and I do regret that. The reason for those cutbacks has been the introduction of a reduction in rent to those people who live in social housing provided by registered providers. And I'm quite sure that a lot of those people welcome the reduction in rents, but unfortunately the knock-on effect has meant that has reduced the income of the registered providers, and in turn that has meant in fact that there is less money available to develop. Now, I believe that situation is starting to be remedied, because I think on the 11th of November, which was only a few days ago, the government did announce that a further £18 million was being made available to help develop new houses. So I certainly welcome that. I do think it goes some way towards rectifying the situation, which, as I say, personally, I'm not happy about, and I'll be quite clear about that. I would much have preferred that the grants that has enabled people like City West, and I do sit on the main board of City West, and I do regret that it has reduced the amount that we can actually do. And I would certainly do whatever I can, in whatever position I'm in, to actually try and rectify that, and if need be, to lobby the government on those particular points. I do think that the homelessness reduction bill is a move in the right direction. And I'm not going to go through every part of this motion, but I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, totally support those 7 paragraphs. 99% of the motion I totally support. And I really regret that I'm being pushed, and my group is being pushed, into a situation where we can't totally support the motion because of that. And, we're being accused of not being caring. I hope, in fact, that however we decide to deal with this at the end of the motion, there'll be at least some way of being able to address that. But I really do regret that we can't totally support the whole motion without that amendment. I do hope, in fact, that in terms of the right to buy, I'm afraid that last paragraph is really just an attempt to criticise the right to buy. And I think if we look back over the years, over many, many years, Margaret Thatcher was the person to introduce the right to buy, and I totally supported that policy at the time and still support it now. I don't believe that every policy is foolproof, and I think errors were made in the way that right to buy was dealt with in some cases. But the fact remains, Madam Chair, that a huge number, tens of thousands of people who lived in council houses, we used to call them, now social housing, were...
Councillor Garrido, you've got 50 seconds. Can I just say you've got a lot of your members. You're the Chief Whip, so if you want to move to a vote, then you can say you can move to a vote. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say you have to stand up and move, and that the question now be put.
You know what I mean. I'll get there. Yes, I would like to move that we vote on this motion. And question now report. Thank you.
Anybody to second that motion? All those in favour, please show. All those against? Can we now put the motion? Oh, yeah, sorry. Councillor Longshaw has the right to reply. Before you start, can I apologise to Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Warmisham for not being able to call them in the debate.
thank Madam Chair and the debates. The reason for structuring the motion as it was, I thought I explained in the way I moved it. It was fundamental to tackling homeless is an increase in supply. This means ensuring that there are enough genuinely affordable homes for people. This is something we must continue to push government on, and we must urge government to fully fund support services and fully fund homelessness prevention work, and we must lead the way. I support Councillor Collinson. She was very helpful in terms of working with me on this motion, and she was very helpful from the background that she's got with Emmaus. There are other councillors in this chamber, Councillor Warmachine, who does similar things with Loaves and Fishes, previous councillors that have been here as well, who really make a difference to charitable and third sector organisations, and if it wasn't for them, we'd be in an absolute worse mess. To Councillor Garrido, Robin Garrido, I welcome the kind offer of coaching, but I'll decline this offer with a smile on my face on this occasion. In terms of the right to buy in this city, we've lost 13,000 homes that have gone under right to buy. They've not been replaced one for one or like for like. The replacement ratio has been for every 185 sold, one has been replaced. And that is an important point to make in terms of introducing the vote for this motion. So, thank you.
I'm just going to take a drink then. Thank you very much, Councillor Longshaw. Can I now put the motion to full council? Can I ask all those in favour, please show. All those against? And is there any abstentions? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. The motion is now, in that case, has been carried. Thank you. Can I now call item 12? Can I now call on the statement by the elected City Mayor?
Thank you. Dear Madam Chair, Council and friends, I would first like to say a few words in memory of Pat Ryan, a much-loved Salford resident, passionate Labour Party member, dedicated community politician and a much-loved friend. Pat lived in Salford her whole life, teaching in Little Hulton schools for 34 years before finally retiring her role as head teacher for Our Lady and Lancashire Martyrs Roman Catholic Primary School in 2006. She served as a councillor for Little Hulton for 10 years, campaigning particularly hard for the welfare of children and championing the interests of her constituents. Pat made a big impact on local politics in Salford. She will be missed greatly and never forgotten. I would also like to take this opportunity to pay my respects to those who have lost their lives in conflict. Friday the 11th marked the 99th anniversary of the ceasefire of the First World War, one of the greatest conflicts in human history. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, the First World War ended, and together at Swinton's Cenotaph, we had the opportunity to reflect and remember those who had sacrificed themselves to secure and protect our freedom. It was an honour to be part of this year's Armistice Day, with events taking place across the city to again remember the sacrifices of our fallen heroes. It's great to see more and more residents every year paying their respects and remembering those we have lost. Millions of young men lost their lives in that war, flung far afield into foreign lands, villages, towns and cities across Europe and the Commonwealth. Many millions more were displaced and killed in the conflict which spread across Central Europe. Men, women and children. That war to end all wars, as it was known, sadly did no such thing. We would go on to fight the Second World War, and following from that, many more conflicts around the world. But in remembering the dead, we honour their sacrifice and keep in our hearts the desire to avoid all unnecessary conflict in future. Remembering that only peace ends war. In the words of a soldier and poet, Siegfried Sassoon, from March 1919, do you remember the stretcher cases lurching back with dying eyes and lolling heads, those ashen grey masks of the lads who once were keen and kind and gay. Have you forgotten yet? Look up and swear by the green of the spring that you will never forget. With the greatest of respects to the memories of those we have lost, we will never forget the price that has been paid for the lives we all lead today. In moving from remembering our past and thinking towards the future, for the past few months we've been engaged here in Salford in a consultation with the public over our future budgetary proposals. I'd like to thank all the 590 people who've actually participated in this consultation, which is an increase from last year where we only saw 80 people participate. Residents in Salford feel a deep sense of community spirit and pride. They also feel strong connections with their neighbours and are deeply attached to the city in which they live. They consider Salford a friendly place with a rich heritage. But much of this will be no surprise to us as local politicians, where we interact with open, friendly and diverse communities on a day-to-day basis. Our residents love our parks and they love our green spaces. And as Salfordians, they feel a strong sense of pride around Salford Quays, Media City and the Lowry, putting this city in a national spotlight and on a national stage. However, the budget consultation has also revealed some concerns that residents have. Litter and the cleanliness of our streets is very much high on their agenda. The movement of the black bin collections to a 3-weekly system has also caused some criticism. And clearly, as a local authority, we must better explain the financial and environmental benefits of this system. Under a policy of national austerity, with biting cuts from a government still determined to slash budgets, we can't continue to pay top rates for landfill use when items can be more cheaply recycled. We also need to make it clear that there are provisions such as larger bins for those with larger families or those caring for several children. We understand the stress of adapting to a new system, and we will work with people to help this transition through the recycling and reward scheme and general information, advice and guidance. But to be frank, we are in an impossible situation because of Tory cuts, forced to choose between which vital services we protect in the City Council and those we cut. Our residents remain concerned about the community safety. They also remain concerned about a whole host of other issues within this city. As well as these issues, fly tipping is cited as a particular problem, blighting the communities of many of our vulnerable residents in the city. One of the highest concerns from residents within this city is homelessness. And some of you may have seen my face in the MEN on Monday, along with Councillor Longshaw and Rebecca Long-Bailey MP for Salford and Eccles, because we attended the annual count for rough sleepers within our city. What we discovered was devastating. Absolutely devastating. Walking through the cold at night is never a pleasant experience. But imagine if this was your whole life, trying to find somewhere to lay down in the freezing cold, wet and winter. Throughout the night we came across 5 people, which was actually lower than the previous year. A 19-year-old man found sleeping rough in a park had been there for 3 months. And another man was slipping in and out of consciousness, barely covered by a blanket. However, just because we didn't come across more people sleeping rough, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. There were 27 people sleeping in the Narrogate on the night of the official count in Langworthy. There are also dozens more sleeping in church halls. All of these don't count towards the official rough sleeping number. The system for counting is clearly flawed, and we can only officially count the people we found sleeping rough on our streets. Everyone in housing is telling us that rough sleeping is rising, and we are seeing more and more people pushed into insecure living arrangements. Last year, 1,600 people presented themselves to the council without a home, And in the first 6 months of this year, we placed over 250 families in temporary accommodation because they had no other option. That's why this morning the Council has supported the motion to endorse the new Homelessness Reduction Bill through Parliament, brought to us through Bob Blackburn MP's work, meaning that no one will be refused a home because they are not considered a priority. The problem is getting worse. Government cuts have caused reductions in frontline services to help these people, as well as ending all future funding for affordable social rented housing. And though much fanfare is being made of policies such as the Homelessness Prevention Grant, in practice this will only mean a meagre £71,000 a year for Salford. Though the intentions are positive, the reality is that we cannot help people unless there is more investment in services. We will push government hard for a better and fairer deal for the people of this city. Particularly, what we need is to end the homelessness epidemic is more housing, socially affordable housing at fair rents. There's been a chronic market failure in housing, and we can't keep looking to profit-based solutions to solve this problem. Many of you will have seen the headline story on building new low-cost rented homes via the council. This is a revolutionary scheme which would see council-owned homes at living rents built in our city, distributed according to social need and placed outside of the right to buy. This will not solve the housing needs requirements in the city, but it will be part of an overall solution. By showing our determination in these financially difficult and awful times, it shows that we will care. We will always push for a fairer and better housing solution for the people in our city. Right to buy has been disastrous. Its impact on local authorities has been awful. We've already heard Councillor Longshaw share with you some of the statistics, all as a consequence of a Tory government under Thatcher. It has made the provision of social and council housing out of reach for many, many councils across this country. Labour supports the aims for a balanced housing market, for people getting a foot on the housing ladder to shared ownership, renting and housing cooperatives. But selling off public assets for next to nothing and not replacing those homes for others has helped cause the perfect storm, especially when some of those new buyers couldn't cope, have subsequently moved on, or are now landlords living hundreds of miles away and often in other countries with little regard for their tenants and their communities. As our ability to house vulnerable residents has decreased, the increasing number of homelessness people on our streets has been clear to see by all. That's why we have to take a stand now. But housing the homeless are only two of the most visible symptoms of a deeper systemic malaise. We refer to it as poverty. Child poverty in particular has seen a terrifying increase over the past few years. In some parts of our country, nearly half of the children live in poverty. The number of children living in poverty increased by 200,000 last year alone, and the Institute for Fiscal Policy Studies predicts further rises of a staggering 50% by 2020. Moves to lower the benefit cap may move as many as 40,000 children nationally below the breadline. In Salford, we're told that 433 families currently will be severely impacted by the benefit cap welfare reforms, and the number of homelessness children is expected to hit an 8-year high this Christmas. This is absolutely nothing to be proud of, especially at a time when many of us are preparing for Christmas celebrations with friends and family. The Tory recovery is creating a nation of low-paid, low-skilled, insecurely employed workers who increasingly see benefit dependency and living on the breadline as a normal way of life. According to the research recently published by the House of Commons Library, the number of people on relatively low incomes after housing costs are taken into consideration was 13.5 million between 2014 2015. This was up 300,000 on the previous year and makes up 21% of the British public. And this goes on. The Tories continue to massage the statistics. Unemployment figures are based on numbers of people dropping out of the benefit system at the same time that punitive sanctions are being deployed to make claiming benefits harder and harder. This is playing politics with people's lives, and it's playing politics with the lives of the British people. The Tory economic model is failing. It is not providing the lives which British people expect or deserve. It drives inequality, social exclusion and isolation and misery within our communities. Until the Tories are out of number 10, there will be more suffering for the British people under this cruel regime. And until we have a Labour government in place, this will continue. But through this, we face many challenges. And as a council, we are taking those challenges seriously. As has been already mentioned, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework is a great challenge, but also provides fantastic opportunities. We have to make sure that the fantastic growth from Media City and the Quays is continued, building the digital industries and companies of the future. We have huge plans to build up the industrial and warehousing capacity of this city, becoming a gateway to the Atlantic through the development of Port Salford. We have to make sure that we have room for the thousands of new residents expected to join our Salford community over the next few years. High-rises and apartments are flying up across the city, especially in and around the city's historic core, and they will soon be populated with a multitude of new people. And we have to ensure that those fantastic, strong, friendly communities we spoke about earlier do not disappear. We need to make sure that the new homes are affordable for Salford residents who need them, who need to make sure that the benefits of our growth are for everyone and not just the few. That means protecting our accessible green spaces, as we are doing with the Worsley Greenway. It means keeping our parks open, planting trees and improving air quality. And our job with the GMSF also means meeting our infrastructure requirements for transport and flood prevention. This is Salford's time, and our task now is to ensure we collaborate for an inclusive growth for all. It's been a hectic 7 months, and I'm near conclusion, Madam Chair, since the election, but we've already achieved an awful lot. There are far more plans in the pipeline as well for a more socially inclusive, dynamic, growing Salford. But the challenges we face are still mounting as the systemic failure of Tory economic model becomes clear. Rising inequality, rising in work poverty, insecure employment, low-skilled jobs, rising homelessness. This is a terrifying prediction for the future, which the Conservative Party will make a reality if nothing is done to challenge their vision. Together, united, as a Labour Party, we are the only force in British politics capable of challenging Tory rule and fighting for the interests of ordinary working people. We will keep fighting for a better and fairer Salford for all. And that wasn't funny, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, City Mayor. We now have questions or comments to the City Mayor. Councillor Hines. Whatever, questions or comments? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Mayor has talked about all the big issues that really should be concerning us all this morning. We've had the debates on homelessness, on the spatial strategy, again with homelessness. He's talked about poverty, austerity, which many of us have been talking about for the last 6 years. I argued and still argue that the austerity
decisions that the coalition and now this government have taken on is more political than economic, quite frankly. But the economics have been made worse over those years. But the big important issue to me today was the benefit cap that can only make that more and more terrible for people that are involved. And I just want to comment on something that I read the other day. And I'd like to ask people that what socialist made this comment. When one among us falters, our most basic human instinct is to put our own self-interest aside, to reach out to our hand to help them over the line. That's why the centre tenet of my belief is that there is more to life than individualism and self-interest. We form families, communities, towns, cities, counties and nations. We have a responsibility to one another, and I firmly believe that government has a responsibility too. What socialist made that comment? Do people know? Well, I'll tell you, it was Theresa May. Now, do we believe that? No, we don't. And that obviously contrasts with what was said by a previous Prime Minister. I think we've gone through a period where too many people have been given to understand that if they have a problem, it's in the government's job to cope with it. They're casting their problem on society, and you know there is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. Who said that one? Exactly. Now, the issue is on the benefit cap. I've just seen the film, by the way, and I don't know how many people have seen the film, of I, Daniel Blake. The MP saw this film a few weeks ago, and she broke down in tears. My youngest grandson saw the film, and he broke down in tears. Councillor Antrobus tells me he saw the film, and he was brought to tears. My wife saw the film with me, and she was brought to tears. Was I brought to tears? No, I wasn't. I was angered to my core that this is happening in this country today. That people now are going through hoop after hoop to claim the basics of human dignity. It's an absolute disgrace what's happening. The Conservatives quite understand that when they say that they care. I do believe that you care, but quite frankly, you put other things before care. And this is the tragedy of it all. And I'm not saying that you believe in this. In fact, I know that many of you don't. And Aaron Bevan, many years ago, said the Tories are vermin. Now, I'm not saying that you're like that. But when I see the politics of the Daniel Blakes, and of course it's fictional, but it's real. Day in, day out, people are going through this. Councillor Bentham, who sees it day after day in the job that she does. It's nothing more than tragedy. And people that are bringing this about, and again I say it, it's not you, but people that are bringing it about in power are nothing short, in my view, of vermin. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hines. Councillor Turner.
My gosh, this is getting gloomy, and the language is a bit to be desired. Can I start off with some good news, actually, because we've had a lot of bad news from the City Mayor amongst his good news in his usual way. The new statistics yesterday demonstrated that employment remains at a record rate of 74.5%, with 31.8 million now in work, which I think is great news, that the employment rate remains at a record high, with more than 31.8 million men and women in work, showing that the fundamentals of our economy remain strong. But there's more to do, we agree. That's why we've been announced that we're going to roll out the Job Centre Plus Support for Schools scheme in England, which will give tens of thousands of young people help in taking their first steps in the world of work. Now, Labour always try and tell Britain, all these jobs are part-time, insecure and poorly paid. In fact, since 2010, over 70% of the rise in employment has been from full-time work. Since 2010, 95% of the growth in employment has come from permanent employees or people working for themselves. Real wages are continuing to rise strongly. Now, a Labour government. You must be joking. Are you serious believing that the person that you follow as your leader is going to form a government? Yes. Well, you're very disillusioned because the British people don't think so. Have you seen his popularity ratings? Have you really seen them? And his approval ratings? Goodness me! Most of your talent is on the back benches. And do you know why? They can't agree with him. They don't believe in his way forward, which is your way forward. Come on. Labour lost the last election because people did not believe their credibility on the economy. They still don't believe your ability to do the economy. It might be that there's faults in the government, there's faults in all governments, but the opposition is non-existent. And you need to think about that before you start getting up there preaching all this rubbish that you're preaching. It really is. And next time you see a minister, don't forget to tell them all about it. But I should do that before you ask them for anything. Thank you.
No, but you... Right, can I just say that it is now nearly 22. We have got 5 minutes, and we haven't even reached the general questions to Cabinet members, and we haven't done the boards, and we haven't heard from the first two, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Ferguson. We didn't get round to you in September, and it looks very much, I'm sorry to say, that we're not going to get round to you in November. I do think we need to be looking at this council agenda. There is too many outside things, and we're not getting, and perhaps we need to be moving members forward to the beginning. I can't say that, but I am saying it, so I hope it's taken on board. Right.
Am I allowed to respond?
I'm just coming back now. City Mayor, can you respond to that question? Only the question.
So, I mean, if I can decipher what Councillor Turner was saying, because he was saying an awful lot, I think his general question was about employment statistics, and he referenced the statistic of 74.5% people being in work. Obviously, Councillor Turner didn't necessarily listen to what I was saying in my speech, because what I said is, according to research recently published by the House of Commons Library, when you take housing costs into account, we've got 13.5 million people in this country who are actually living on relatively low incomes. What I'm saying here is we've got a problem with low pay, and that is causing significant problems for this economy. Seriously, this has been a problem ongoing for some time. Quoting official JSA claimant counts isn't really tackling the issue. Quite clearly, you as a party are not interested in this issue. You don't want to qualitatively understand what's going on in the labour market. It's an absolute disgrace, to say the least. The other thing as well is, quite often when you draw attention to the official count, you don't reference the housing benefit bill. And housing benefit is a good indicator of actually what's going on in the labour market, because as we all know, people get paid housing benefit if they can't afford to actually meet the costs of their expenditure. That bill is going up. You've recently taken under 35s out of housing benefit and only said that they can claim the local housing allowance, which again is creating significant pressures for some of our young people within this city. Again, nothing we should be proud of. Obfuscation quite clearly on Councillor Turner's part. Let's deal with the facts, Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I know Councillor Guido was going to speak, but because of the time, we're actually going to move on to Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor Bentham. So perhaps you may think of being a bit short as well. Thank you.
I was pre-warned of a question I was going to be asked, and that was about the Council's attitude towards living wage.
No, you're asking questions or comments to the City Mayor? Or are you doing your own bit? Well, no, you can't take a liberty here today. You
Before I do make a comment, I was going to make, I'm intrigued at the picture of Councillor Turner rushing down...
Councillor Ferguson, you've got 3 minutes and the City Mayor has to reply, and we're finishing at 1:45.
I wanted to point because the Mayor's been talking about what's happening in Salford, and I did have the pleasure this month, last month on the 31st of October, of going to the launch of Living Wage Week at Manchester University. And I just wanted to make the point that the case for the living wage is particularly clear within Greater Manchester, where wages have fallen faster than the UK average since 2009. And a new economy report has revealed that the number of people paid less than the real living wage rose from 21.7% of employees in 2013 to 24% by the end of 2015. That's a quarter of the working population paid less than the real national wage. And the people most likely to be low-paid jobs are in hospitality, accommodation, retail, residential care. And in retail alone, there are 121,700 are low-paid. Greater Manchester's Living Wage Employer of the Year was announced at that event, and it was IKEA who were presented with their award.
Can I just say, Councillor Ferguson, I think you are stretching my understanding of your comment to the Mayor. Councillor Ferguson, I am sorry, you need to tell your colleagues, right, to do it a little bit shorter. I know, well, perhaps you should be, though. Yes, can I just say, Councillor Bentham, we would like to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Comments to the City Mayor and picking up from where Councillor Hines has left off with regards to benefits and how it's affecting Salford. Since the beginning of September 16, 30 new clients have attended at Salford Unemployed Community Resource Centre for advice after failing the work capability assessment. The work capability assessment is a test whereby sick and disabled people attain points for the level of restriction they have with various activities such as raising one arm above the head and picking up an empty cardboard box. Failure to score 15 points results in the removal of their entitlement to employment and support allowance. Of the 30 new clients, not one had scored a single point. These new clients included a young man with paranoid schizophrenia, an amputee, and a man who could barely breathe due to COPD. In this same period, from September 16 to date, the Centre has represented 17 clients at tribunal with a 76% success rate. Surely this raises the issue of whether the work capability assessment is actually fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I'm going to ask the City Mayor if he would like to reply. I know it is 1:45, but I'm sure you would want to hear the City Mayor make comments on what has been said this morning.
I think I've replied to most of what's been said, but I mean, I welcome the comments that have been made and wholeheartedly endorse them. In terms of the living wage, as you'll all know, we are the only accredited living wage employer in Greater Manchester as a local authority. That is a great achievement. I would like to see other Greater Manchester local authorities follow the lead of Salford in becoming an accredited living wage employer. We've now got 6 months within which to increase the staff's salaries within this organisation. Those who are paid currently at £8.25 an hour will rise to £8.45 an hour. You know, this is a living wage which has basically been calculated off the back of cost of living. This is not some sort of Mickey Mouse gimmicky living wage such as that of George Osborne's living wage of currently £7.20 an hour, which was just a gimmick because they were getting concerned about the momentum this campaign was building. So let's be clear on that. Also, with regards to the point that Councillor Bentham made, I totally welcome the work that the Unemployed Resource Centre does in this city. I think it's absolutely amazing the work you do. You pick up the pieces in some respects where other services can't provide services you provide, such as the tribunal support, which I know others really struggle to provide that support. And quite often it's cases where you've got support at tribunal where the tribunal find in favour of the claimant quite often. And statistics and data will prove that, because obviously when you support someone, they feel a lot more confident in themselves to present their case, and we shouldn't underestimate that. I know Councillor Sharp earlier in the debate talked about cuts to legal advice, and it's exactly the same sort of situation. I'm proud that we've got a centre who are supporting people with the ESA appeals, and I welcome the comments that have been made, Madam Chair.
Can I thank you all very much, and can I again give my apologies to the Cabinet members who've again unfortunately not been heard, and I hope that we actually get in the new year it actually sorted out. And I know it's a little bit early, but we don't have a council meeting in December, so can I wish you and your family all the very best for Christmas, and I hope you have a peaceful and prosperous new year. Thank you. Yeah, and can I just remind you all that there's some things for sale in the parlour?